Section 3.3, completing the square. In this section, you're going to use completing the square to put a function into vertex form, as well as solve an equation, a quadratic, by completing the square. The way to remember how to complete the square is to memorize this saying here that says divide the middle coefficient by 2 and square. Divide the middle coefficient by 2 and square. And to start with, you can solve these equations because on the left they are perfect squares. They're perfect square trinomials. In other words, you can factor this and you would see that on the left it's a perfect square trinomial, which means that you can take the square root of both sides at this point. Now, it's just that way because it's a unique form. They're selecting them so they're easy to factor. And remember, when you take the square root, you have to put the plus or minus. You're going to have two answers. X equals a positive 6 minus 2, and x equals a negative 6 minus 2. So your answers would be 4 and negative 8. All right. The only reason why you can do this is because that's a perfect square trinomial. Now, when you complete the square, you're going to have two terms that look like this. And when you have the square term and the x of the first term, you're going to need to add a number to make it a perfect square trinomial. This adding of the number right here is where you take this middle coefficient, that b, divide it by 2 and square it. When you do that, then this can be factored down into something that looks like this, and then you can go ahead and take the square root of both sides. I think it's most easily seen in an example. So the first one is, what makes this a perfect square trinomial, the c? You take the 14, which is the middle coefficient. That I'm just calling it in the middle because if c was there, then it would be in the middle. 14 divided by 2 squared. So that's going to be 7 by following the order of operations, parentheses first, and then it's going to equal 49. C equals 49 is all you have to do in that particular problem. Again, dividing by 2 and squaring. If I were to do 6, negative 9 divided by 2 and squared, notice this is always going to be positive. So that's going to equal 81 over 4. That's what your C is equal to. Now, how do you use that to solve an equation? Divide by 2 and square. X squared minus 10x. Now we're going to take that negative 10 divided by 2 and square, and that's going to be 25. So I'm going to add 25 to this side. And when you add 25 to this side, you also have to add it to this side to make the equation in balance. Now, when I do that, I'm going to look at those first three terms. X minus 5 squared, and I'll subtract 7 on both sides, is equal to 18. That means when you take the square root of both sides, and remember in the plus or minus, x minus 5 equals plus or minus 3 square roots of 2, because this is 9 times 2, 9 comes out as a 3. Therefore, x is equal to 5 plus or minus 3 square roots of 2, and that would be your answer. That's solving for x. You plug that in for x, and now that equation is going to be equivalent. Let's take a look at solving this one. Again, the problem here is that there is a 3 in the beginning. And most important is that you also have to remember one thing. The beginning coefficient must equal 1. If it doesn't equal 1, you can't solve it by completing the square. Therefore, you have to divide by 3 all the way through on this very first step. So dividing by 3, this nicely becomes that equation. Now looking at that 4, you're going to divide by 2 and square. Dividing 4 by 2 is 2. Squaring it is 4. If you add 4 to one side, you have to add 4 to the other side. So this becomes x plus 2 squared equals -1. Now, when you see that this is equal to a -1, that cannot happen. So the answer is it does not exist. No solution. You can stop right there unless you're talking about complex numbers, which we're not. All right, so let's do one more. If you have a situation like this, first thing that I would do is divide both sides by 6 to make it easier to work with. So you have x times x plus 2 equals -7. X squared plus 2x. And often you, in this case, you can go ahead and leave a space on the left side because you know you have to add something in. So in this case, you're going to divide by 2 and square, and that's going to be +1 plus 1. Again, this is going to be no solution because you're going to have a square equaling a negative number. Okay, so one more time, we'll just do one more problem, number 8, x squared plus 8x dividing by 2 is 4, squaring it is 16, minus 5 plus 16. All right, so this becomes x plus 4 squared equals 21. Taking the square root of both sides. X plus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 21. Therefore, the answer is x equals -4 plus or minus the square root of 21. Can't simplify that, and that would be your answer.